Joining us to gossip with us is Mmatsatsi Ramawela. She is the CEO of the Tourism Business Council of South Africa. It's always lovely to have you. The last time we spoke, things were hot and heated up and there wasn't a solution in sight. Yeah. What's changed and what do you think was the breaking point?
Frustrated. Yeah. You know, you were actually visibly frustrated at what was happening. You said nothing is happening, they're not communicating with us, but they must have been doing something somewhere.
I thought I was diplomatic that day.
Oh, no.
I came out frustrated because of the eco-mobility. It took me forever to get to your studios. So when I came in, I thought I was now diplomatic. I kept a brave face. No, things were looking up, not looking fantastic that time. But as you know now, it's history. You know, government called us all last Friday, all rushed into the government communications offices in Hatfield, and for a briefing session, of course. Yes. And then we all said then that, yeah, what's new? You know, but we are absolutely pleasantly surprised because, you know, the last time when I was here, we kind of said, well, you know, they haven't spoken to any of us. They haven't called us to make a presentation. We don't know what they're going to base their decisions on. So, yeah, we don't know what's coming out. But pleasantly surprised, you know, that they've really consulted. They spoke to the child protection people. They also took a lot of the data we submitted via the various ministries and the presidency. Yeah, and they came out with concessions.
So perhaps to capture some of those voices, because earlier in the week, CNBC Africa caught up with the SATSA CEO, that's David Frost, as well as Graham Stevens. He's the chief executive of Sun International, another industry player, smack bang in the middle of this issue. And they spoke with Bruce Whitfield, and this is what they had to say on this surprise about turn.
We're incredibly grateful for the accommodation that's been struck. It's very much what we asked for in the first instance. We were suggesting when we looked at this that we were not blind at all to the issues of state security, but that what we needed to do was balance that with tourism growth. And to that end, we were suggesting biometrics on arrival, which they've moved to. And we strongly opposed the birth certificate issue because it's totally out of kilter with the rest of the world, the only country that introduced this. And there's no sort of proof that it actually has a sort of combating effect on the 23 cases of child trafficking, which was the quantum of the problem.
Yeah. Mmatsatsi, have you got what you wanted? I think there was an element of saying we've changed some things, and I think the Minister of Home Affairs needed face to be saved on this. But in practice, have you got what you wanted?
I think we did. You know, we have, because I think government has really looked at the damage this thing has done. Because, you know, there's just so many things going on that's not really into our favor. You know, we cannot ignore what Ebola has done to this African continent. It doesn't matter where you go in the world, and you go to China and you say, I'm from South Africa. They only emphasize on the Africa bit. Yep. And so they're not worried about how far you are from what you are from Africa. This is it. Yeah. You know, then you have the issue of xenophobic attacks here at home, which is not helping. Of course, the global economy is in a bit of a fix with the #2 economy in the world going through what is going at the moment. So there's a whole lot of things going on in the world that's really not standing in our favor. Plus the competition. People are not sitting. Every country in the world is looking at tourism as the savior. And so, you know, government has taken all those into consideration and said, guys, what can we do to help our economy? And I think we've been helped as well because I know, for instance, that a lot of the South Africa's ambassadors, especially in the African continent, you know, they've been, you know, singing, you know, to the minister and through cabinet that, guys, this is not working for us. And of course, all the other missions, all the other. So there's just been a combination of voices that have really made government to listen up, and really we appreciate it.
And now that the voices have found each other and everybody seems to be on the same hymn sheet, how long do you think the recovery is going to take? And, you know, what's a realistic expectation in terms of moving forward from here?
Let me say this. When we met with them, and that's why it was beautiful when we met with them, they actually divided this whole concession implementation into 3 phases. They said there's what we call the immediate phase, and immediate means a 3-month window. Between, let's say, 1st of November to the end of January. It's what they call the immediate phase. And this is where they're saying they're going to work out a lot of the legalities. You know, because, you know, before something comes out into the public, you need to know how it's going to work with the law. And, you know, we know, for instance, one of the things they're going to have to do is to revise the standard operating procedures, which is what an immigration official will have to take. When somebody walks through, they're going to look at it and say, okay, you're walking in with a child, you know, what does it mean? You know, so for instance, when you talk about what are the things that we got that excites us, at the fact that they've relaxed the requirements requirement for unabridged birth certificate
Yeah.
from our key countries, like, those are visa exempt countries. And one of the things in this immediate period that we will want to be working on, they've said something like they're going to give a strong advisory. And we've been saying, what does it mean?
Well, does business have a role to play here? And the Massmart chairman and former Old Mutual South Africa and emerging market CEO Kuseni Dlamini spoke to us.
Already, our South African business is playing a role in tertiary education, not just through bursaries. It's playing a role in 5 ways. Firstly, through the corporate taxes that the private sector pays, which go into the fiscus, which in turn funds higher education. Secondly, by funding chairs in most universities. You'll struggle, Nozipo, to go to any university where there is no chair of this or that, funded by this or that private sector player. Thirdly, the business sector also pays the skills levy, which goes to the SETAs, and we know that the SETAs currently have a surplus of 5 billion rand, and that surplus can be tapped into to fund the no-fee increase that President Zuma has announced. And lastly, through expenditure in infrastructure, in strategic development of campuses. You've been to university, there's this or that this or that library funded by this or that company. But can business do more and do better? I'll be the first to say yes, of course.
I left out a sentence there saying that we were moving from the tourism issue, which I think we've wrapped up.
Yeah.
And it's great to hear that you are satisfied and the language you're using is very positive. But the other big issue of the week has been those fees.
Absolutely, and it was also nice and surprising to see private sector players coming to the desk to say, this is our view about what we think should happen as a private sector. And Kuseni, they're saying business is doing quite a bit in the education space, but more could be done. Again, you're an industry player in a different sector altogether, watching this development unfold in our country. What's been your sense about how do we find a solution to this particular issue?
Well, it was really very disheartening to see what was going on, that we tend to leave things until the people erupt. And they really, if you look at it, what the students are saying, I was once a student myself, and I remember at UCT we were, writing for a different purpose altogether. But if you look at it, we keep on saying that South Africa has a shortage of skills. Now, here are the people that are investing their time, and this becomes leaders of tomorrow. So I think it's going to take all of us. It's going to take government, it's going to take communities, it's also going to take business to really put our heads together and invest in these leaders of tomorrow. It's not going to be a one-sided thing. And for me, I think one of the things we need to deal with in South Africa is the issue of misuse and abuse. That some of the views that I've really been following the views across, and now, as I said, I was a student once, where people who really need these things don't get access to it,
right?
And it's those that actually don't need that get it. And you want to talk about business. I mean, for us in tourism, we're very much active in that space. I mean, you will know, for instance, the School of Tourism in the University of Johannesburg. I mean, if you go to a lot of the rooms there, I mean, Saul Kesner started the school, and there's a whole lot of private sector from City Lodge, Avis, Protea that have sponsored some of the various facilities in that school.
Yeah.
So we do a whole lot of things across, but I think it's going to be consolidated and coordinated approach.
I just want to come back to the tourism aspect and brand South Africa and the pictures, pictures of people running around setting fire to things, however few they may be in terms of the bigger picture, can do a lot of damage to a country's reputation.
Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, this is the one thing. It's funny, I just came from a meeting with our Minister of Tourism. We were meeting between 2 and 4 o'clock this afternoon. And one of the things that we were there with the coach operators, the people, who represent the Springbok class, all the major coaches that you see in the street. And this thing came up that, the way people are so very nervous, it really doesn't matter how small it is. The minute there's a little bit of that, they don't want to know. Don't explain. I'm not going. So they change their plans very quickly. So there's a lot of that. There's an urgency for us to really arrest the social dissatisfaction that's going on in our society at the moment, because it's not doing us good, both from an investment and a tourism point of view.
And of course, the man who's supposed to restore some of that confidence is the Minister of Higher Education and Training. That's Minister Blade Nzimande. Here he's commenting on Tonight with Bruce on what he thinks should also be done from the view of the private sector.
We are looking at the private sector. We have to look into the private sector, because we are of the view that the contribution of the private sector is not in line with the benefits that they get, because they are the single largest absorbers of university graduates, to be quite honest. So that's another area that we need to look into.
So, David, what I'm seeing is actually a chasm that is actually now opening, where business is saying, these are the things that we have been doing, and government is saying, fair enough, but we don't think that you're doing enough. And I think this is another beginning of another conversation that's slowly gaining traction.
I think we also need some facts. You know, how much of the fees is paid, the costs of the universities is paid by government at the moment, something like 40%. The fees are something like 20%, and a lot of what the university does is provided by private companies.
Absolutely. That's why I'm saying, you know, for me, it is, the blame game is not going to take us anywhere. I think it's time for a coordinated approach where we say, first of all, it starts with the university themselves. They need to play open cards. What makes up their fees? You know, I, for instance, asked the question, I mean, 10,000 registration fee for a student who's still on a 3-year degree, what does that, what makes that fee, you know? So there is an opening up that university has to come up, in my opinion. And then I think then we go out to all the potential funders. We say to government, you know, here's the fees, now what can you contribute? And private sector, what can you contribute? But in a coordinated fashion, but not in this way that I throw in what I can, you know, I don't think it's going to work.
And it's your fault or it's his fault and not our fault.
Exactly, I don't think it's going to happen.
Well, it certainly sounds like coordination is the key word that we're walking away with. We saw it in the tourism sector, had a very positive conversation around how different stakeholders have found each other and are singing from the same hymn sheet. Hopefully that particular situation can also replicate itself in the higher education crisis that the country is currently facing. A very big thank you to Mmatsatsi Ramawela. She is the CEO of the Tourism Business Council of South Africa.